thank you all for coming. This is our first reading of the quarter, I believe, for the Poem Present series. And I'd like to give a special thank you to the college for providing the Course Arts Innovation Grant that made Craig's visit to the university possible, a visit that's kind of extra special because he's agreed to work with our thesis writers on their manuscripts during his time here. So aside from the really great talk that he gave earlier today, we've also been able to, our students have been able to learn from him individually. But without any further ado, I'll just jump into the business of introductions. I should like to be alone, says a modernist Eve to her gentleman visitor in Marianne Moore's delightfully cranky poem, Marriage. Undaunted, Eve's anonymous suitor, is it Adam, the serpent, Cary Grant, replies that he too would like to be alone. So why not be alone together? This just might be the most ingenious and persuasive proposal on record. Why not be alone together? Marriage, in this life, is kind of like a poetry reading. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to be alone together. Craig Morgan Teicher's first collection of poetry, Brenda is in the Room and Other Poems, is a book about being alone together. Even if Brenda is in the room, writes the poet in the collection's title poem, I can occupy the room as if I am the only person here. There's ample room in mixed company for our shared solitudes, just as there is space in even the tiniest Brooklyn walk-up for two lovers to make a home. Brenda is the poet's wife. They share a love both erotic and philosophical. Praising his beloved, Teicher rewrites Heraclitus's most famous aphorism, observing that she never steps out of the same dress twice. How could any Brenda not love that line? Brenda is the poet's wife, yes, but Brenda is also a poet herself, the award-winning poet Brenda Shaughnessy, author of 2 collections of verse. But of course, Brenda is also every you who enters into the intimacies of Teicher's postmodern pillow book. The whole collection, Brenda is in the Room, may be read as a kind of epithalamium, a wedding poem, but a funny sort of epithalamium, where the author is also the bridegroom, both giver and recipient of his own literary gift, which makes this, in Teicher's words, a self-epithalamium, as it were. There is, of course, a hidden meaning to the term self-epithalamium. Whether one falls under the categories of wed, divorced, single, or that 21st century condition, it's complicated, the self marries itself to its own past, future, and present without end. Marriage is a threshold, writes Teicher. If marriage is a threshold, then marriage is a metaphor. Marianne Moore, who never married, knew this. Metaphor, in the original sense of the word, means to carry over. A metaphor carries one, like a new bride in certain cultures, across the threshold of is into a new dwelling. 2 people pass through the ceremonial threshold of marriage and enter a room together, writes Teicher. It is a new room, or, defying physics through ceremony, the same room they left, though different. Kind of like this room, where Brenda both is and isn't, which makes one feel like everyone else who has ever been born, or who will ever be born, both is and isn't. Let us defy physics through ceremony. Please join me in welcoming Craig Morgan Teicher.
I have to put on my wire first because I'm a secret spy for the FBI and you guys are all being surveilled. They told me I had to put this thing on. Well, so thank you so much, Chicu, for that wonderful, wonderful introduction, which Brenda would love to hear too. And thank you for bringing me out, and thanks to the University of Chicago. And it's just been really great to get to meet everyone I've gotten to meet in the last 2 days and see what everybody's doing. It just seems like a great program and a great community. So I'm going to read a few poems from the book and then some newer things. So here goes. I always feel like one has to have all these really good things to say about one's poems, but I don't know what they are. But I'll try to think of them. This is called Voice. Inaudible voice, silent voice, voice in my head, voice of my head. Speaker of my thoughts, speaker of thoughts, I do not think, but hear in my thoughts when I am thinking. Voice of my brother, I have no brother. Tell me what I should do. Tell me I should not listen to you. If only they could hear you, may they never hear you. Voice of my dead. My child voice calling into the hallway for comfort no one gets anymore, though no one forgets. My dark voice who lies with me every night, keeping me awake until you've worried your words to sleep. Come here, sick voice, stern, pathetic voice of my father, voice that tells stories over and over. How does hurting me protect me, sweet, worried voice of my mother, voice that repeats until words have no meaning, voice that rehearses every word. Cruel voice, come here, only stories end, which are words flocking to other words, like blood cells to wounds. Come here. So this book was mostly written in the year leading up. In the year during which I was engaged to Brenda, and definitely if you want to set up your marriage where you get a couple extra points, because trust me, you'll need to kind of store points. You'll need them later. Name your book after your fiance. And then, say something nice about her stepping out of a dress or stepping into a dress or how nice she looks. But you put it in a poem so that then it's there forever. So then when you forget to say it thereafter, you're like, but I didn't forget. I said it. It's echoing through time. Actually, this doesn't work. You still have to do it every time. But we can pretend. And I'm still waiting for her to do the book about me, which I don't think is forthcoming. And all of her love poems are about love gone horribly wrong. So I don't know that I do want the book about me. Anyway, I'll read the title poem from the book, which is a little bit longer. It sort of is set in this little office that we have, which used to be our office, which is now our son's room. So the room is no longer this room, but it's kind of a better room. Anyway, this is called Brenda is in the Room. 1. Brenda is not in the room. I am in the room. The room is the office we share. My desk near the door, hers up against the window. The room is oblong. 2. Every good boy deserves a room. Room, a space that is or can be occupied. A good room is a fortress, a projection of the mind of its occupants, an inviolable space in which something can be completed, be it sex, work, or sleep. Every good girl also deserves a room. 3. I am in the room, hiding, though not hard to find. Brenda, for instance, could guess where I am. When she gets home, this is most likely where she will also be. 4. Thresholds are of the utmost importance to rooms, allowing for entry and exit, and also facilitating occupation. Further, they give rooms context via the addition and proximity of other rooms. The room into which one passes immediately after leaving the kitchen, because it enables quick and easy transport of food to those who will eat it, is the dining room. Those two rooms taken together form a special area of the house. The spaces between words are their thresholds. The meaning engendered by the juxtaposition yielding the phrase after leaving is not the sum of the meanings of after and leaving. 5. Marriage is a threshold. Marriage, the legal union of a man and a woman as husband and wife according to the dictionary. Also, more generously, a close union. The marriage of heaven and hell, a more perfect union. Union, a combination so formed, especially a confederation of people, parties, or political entities for common interest. Two people pass through the ceremonial threshold of marriage and enter a room together. It is a new room, or defying physics through ceremony, the same room they left, though different. 6. One place when occupied by one person, 2 or more places when occupied by 2, and so on. A room is not unlike the interior of a million-sided die. 7. Any statement made with an authoritative tone can take on the appearance of fact. Author, one who originates or creates something. 8. Statement, something stated. Fact, something having real, demonstrable existence. Information presented as true and accurate. Brenda will be home soon. 9. Even if Brenda is in the room, I can occupy the room as if I am the only person here. 10. One hopes that one is capable of placing some of one's mind in the form of words which, like thoughts, have no physical substance but have some kind of energy, if one believes in them, on paper. One then hopes that someone will read the paper. Read, to obtain information from a storage medium. I hope Brenda will read this paper. 11. Stanza means room. This poem is divided into sections, which are also like rooms. I am writing this poem on a computer, which could be thought of as containing many rooms occupied by information. The computer is on a desk, which is in the room described above. 12. Arranging words on paper gives an author the opportunity to carefully control the ways information is obtained from his or her storage medium or mind, meaning that any information obtained from a piece of writing is new information, inasmuch as its source is not the author's mind, but the words arranged by the author on the piece of paper, which may or may not offer clues to the originating mind. 13. For instance, Section 5, which first mentions marriage, was originally composed as Section 14, but was then moved in order to ensure that marriage would be a subtext throughout the poem, which is, after all, about transitions and the ways the same ideas and spaces are different when occupied or portrayed differently, or when the particular circumstances that begot them change. 14. This section of the poem, which was composed after the one it follows, and after the one that follows it, would not exist if not for the section that is now numbered 5. 15. A good room should be able to contain whatever fits through the threshold, though larger items may be brought in piecemeal and assembled inside. 16. In many ways, 2 people are larger than the rooms, including those with 4 walls and those that are figured on paper that they occupy. To portray them factually, an author, architect, or writer must construct rooms that admit the necessity for still more rooms. In a building, this would mean many connected rooms to be used for different purposes, with adjoining rooms grouped in a comprehensible and useful manner. On paper, word choices must show an awareness that they convey only a part of their hoped-for meanings. The sentence, "Brenda is in the room, and rain-tinted light flows from her head," ultimately tells only part of the story. 17. Now Brenda is in the room. She is typing on her computer while I am typing on mine. We live together in an apartment with 5 rooms. Soon we will be married and still living in this same apartment, which will be exactly the same size. We will cross its many thresholds as ever, in one way occupying just one room at a time, and in another occupying many rooms. We will have crossed a ceremonial threshold, passing out of one figurative room and into another, or into many others. These rooms may or may not have physical substance. We may need more rooms than we can afford to have. We may need to straddle thresholds or close a door and both be on both sides at once. Let me say that anyone who cohabitates knows that the apartment doesn't stay the same size at all, especially after you get married. I'm not sure if it gets bigger or smaller. It sort of changes. It expands and contracts. I don't know. I'm going to read, I think, one more from the book and then read some other stuff. So this is called My Embodiment. Look down. Look at your body, how it falls from your head like water dumped from a bucket. Is that you? What does that body have to do with your many, many thoughts? It carries your thoughts around with it. Have you ever had a thought in your leg? Yes, when you were running. When a thought was in your hand, you wrote it down, or shaped an urn of clay. You never shaped an urn. An urn for ashes, the ashes of the dead. Your body never thinks of death, but it carries your thoughts of death like something wrapped and delicate, something precious. Death must be very precious, or else why carry it all your life like an egg? Nothing will hatch. Why carry it? Describe your body. 2 legs wear denim pants. Why? One arm holds a pen while the other steadies a notebook. And all of it supports your head. which rides your body like a prince held aloft in his sedan chair. There is also a torso in a blue shirt. It rests atop your legs. Why bother telling what everyone knows? Because these are your thoughts. They reach for your body, and you want them to be more than its invisible cargo. Because you recognize your thoughts. They're always before your eyes, but your body is still a surprise. So then I'm going to read a couple of things that are, God forbid, in prose. My next book, which is coming out in a year and a half-ish, is a book of fables, and so they're little prose stories that are fables that sort of read up on fables and folktales, and they're kind of like evil bedtime stories or something. But please don't fall asleep because they're not boring, and it's early. Okay, so this is called The Groaning Cows. One night, as if responding to some invisible signal, all the cows began groaning. They groaned and groaned all the next day and did not stop at nightfall. This went on for days and days. No one could sleep. The children were growing more and more afraid. Nearly driven mad, everyone in town gathered in the meeting hall. Were the cows sick? Was it a warning? Of what? What should they do? No one could agree. Someone suggested that perhaps there was something wrong with the grass, and the cows were groaning because their stomachs ached. But this did not seem likely, as the other animals ate the same grass, and none of them was groaning. Someone else wondered whether the cows had finally tired of their servitude. Perhaps their groaning was a cry for freedom. But no one else was willing to believe that cows had such ideas. No one could think of a good explanation, and no one could think what to do, so they agreed to meet again in 1 week's time. Still, the cows continued to groan night and day, while the farmers milked them, while they were being led out to pasture, when it was dark outside and they should have slept. Their voices never tired of groaning. After a week had passed, the town gathered again, and the mayor said that something must be done. He determined that all the cows in town must be slaughtered. Then he would go to the next town and buy more cows with the money set aside for the harvest festival, which they would have to do without this year. Since no one could think of a better idea, the people of the town agreed. That night, all the men met in the square. They brought with them every tool of violence they had, scythes and clubs, knives and picks and rakes, so no one would be without a weapon. Then, holding torches, the mob made its way to the first farm. They would all kill the cows together. As they reached the place where the groaning cows were standing, the cows seemed to take no notice of their approach, despite the glint of the torches on the blades the men carried. In truth, the men were nervous, still unsure whether they were truly taking the best course, but the mayor was among them, and he urged them on. They raised their weapons and prepared to strike. Just then, a girl ran into their path and stood between the men and the cows. She was the weaver's daughter, a quiet girl who kept rabbits and loved to make up songs. "Stop," she cried. "You must not kill these cows, or else terrible luck will befall us all." Then she put her hand on the soft muzzle of the nearest cow. To her surprise, and to the surprise of everyone there, as she touched it, the cow stopped groaning. Soon all of the cows were quiet, and precious silence filled the night. Everyone went home and slept for what seemed like the first time in their lives. The next night, just as the sun finally set, all the pigs began groaning, as if responding to some invisible signal. They groaned and would not stop. The poor weaver's daughter. She knew then, when she heard the groaning, that her life would never be her own. It would belong to the pigs and the cows, to the goats and the ducks, to the hens and the rabbits. Most of all, it would belong to the men, whom she knew would never let her be. So they're, sort of grim. I mean, the fun thing about fables is just all these bad things happen to, really endearing animals. And it's funny because, in the 20th century, Disney's been like, oh, no, let's make them all happy. But, Bambi's mother dying is the least of it. I mean, it's just, don't do this or your whole family will die. And then they do it. And their whole family, all the foxes die. And it's like, oh, shit. So here's where's the one I want to read? one sec. So this is a little story about like a very unlucky bird, which I now cannot find. Where is it? Okay. I thought it'd be a great idea to put all my things in binders. Like, it'd be really fun to have like projects organized in binders. But then it's not, because you have to carry binders around, which is bad. And they're heavy, it turns out. And they cost $30, these thesis binders, which, you know, those of you who are doing theses probably are all too familiar with. This is called The Unexceptional Bird. The day the little bird was born, no bells rang to mark its birth. When, many weeks later, the bird leapt from a branch and flew through the air for the very first time, no festival was held in its honor, though to the bird this certainly seemed a momentous occasion. I guess I'm not very special, thought the bird, for otherwise someone would watch and mark my achievements. I must be, though I did not until now believe I was, one of God's unexceptional creations, like the grains of sand and the blades of grass, which, taken together, mean a very great deal. For what would be if there were no birds? But as individuals, don't come to much. Somewhat saddened, though reasonably satisfied by this explanation, the bird went on about its life, eating unexceptional worms and gathering unexceptional sticks to fortify its unexceptional nest. Then, one day, perhaps a year later, the bird died when a squirrel accidentally dropped a heavy nut on the bird's head from high atop a tree. The squirrel did not notice, and most of the creatures in the woods were used to seeing dead birds, so no one said or thought much about it. That afternoon, which was a warm spring afternoon, two children, a brother and sister who were known for having nasty manners, came walking through the woods on the path where it happened that the bird's body had fallen. "Oh, look," said the brother when he came upon the dead bird on the path. "A dead bird, and freshly dead. What shall we do with it, sister dear?" "Oh," said this sister, who was very excited, "we must do something, for to leave a dead bird would surely be a waste. Let us put it in this box I've brought," she said. "Yes," replied the brother, "and then let us set the box on fire." "Wonderful," cried his mischievous sister, "and then we can watch the bird pop and turn black like a loaf overcooked in the oven." And that is just what they did. If only the bird could have seen himself now. How truly exceptional he had become, at least to these two wicked children who had never burned a bird before and who had never seen one burned on a lovely spring afternoon. So let that be a lesson to you. I'll read one more of these and then finish up with a couple of newer poems. The other. I've always been fascinated by this idea of somebody raised by wolves. You know, like what a great idea. You drop your baby by accident. Where's my baby? And then it, 20 years later, it comes out as the wolf man, and it's like, and it can sort of has like little bits of speech, but really it does wolf things, and wolves like it, and it can talk to dogs or something. I don't know. So there are a couple of pieces in here around that notion, and this is one of them. It's called Raised by Wolves. He could have been, though he was not. He had never even seen a wolf. He had lived with his father and mother in a big white house with a bay window. But had he been left in the woods, though they would never have left him anywhere and never went in the woods, wolves could have found him, and instead of thrashing him about until he was only something for them to eat, they could have taken him in as one of their own, though of course that is not what happened. Though had it happened, he would never have had to suffer his father's senseless midnight rages, nor his anxious morning silence as though the day had been haunting him all night long, nor his mother's cowed protectiveness, all of which he did suffer, swaddled in a silence of his own. But he could have learned to detect the unfamiliar scent of an intruder in the woods, or the well-known odor of an enemy. He could have known how to distinguish predator from prey by the rustling of the leaves. Though what would prey on a wolf? Of course, he never had to answer that question, for he was safe in his house, where even the walls cast shadows and the floors groaned to mark the slow passing of his childhood years. But he could have run with the pack. Perhaps he could have even led it, were he able to tame his fellow wolves by filling their hearts with fear, which they deeply love, for fear brings order to their wild lives, tells them where to go and what to do. For he did know that those whom he most feared, and those whom he tried to make most afraid, were the ones whose love he most deeply needed. Wolves are not alone in their love of fear. And then it's another binder. It's good to have your binders. So I'll just read a couple of new poems, and then we can eat cheese. Obama won, which was good and which was, the best thing ever. So I kind of had hoped that this poem would just become obsolete, but I don't think it quite does. Maybe the sad truth is that poems about feeling weird about war will never be obsolete. Sort of obviously. Anyway, this is called Ultimately Justice Directs Them. 1. The soldiers are coming. The soldiers are coming to break America. The soldiers are dispatched from America, and they are landing their boats on American shores. 2. Why are the soldiers coming? Not because they believe in what they were told, but because they believe that ultimately justice directs them, that ultimately the right thing will happen. 3. We say they are the soldiers, but they are not. They have eyes and hands and hairstyles and children and expressions on their faces that their mothers remember on the faces of the infants they were. They are coming to break everything down to basics. America has become too frumpy for its pants. Its health care system cares not for health. 5. Its laws are more paper. 6. Its schools are more paper. 7. Its schools are brick and paper. 8. That is what the soldiers will say. 9. America looks at itself and sees itself, not America. 10. Itself looks at itself and calls what it sees America. 11. America has begun calling everything America, no matter what. 12. Now more than ever. 13. Operation America. Operation with extra cheese. Operation with fries with that. Operation No Child Left Behind. Operation Enduring Sandwich. Operation Regurgitated Eagle. Operation Prince of Freedom. Operation All Night Long. Operation Perhaps. Operation No Really. 14. 15. The soldiers are here. 16. Operation Big Time Pause. 17. Operation Please and Thank You. 18. Operation Paper. Operation No More Stars. 19. The soldiers are wearing yellow ribbons in support of the return of the regular guy. 20. The soldiers are on TV right outside the door. 21. They are knocking. Change the channel. 22. Operation America Go. Operation Yes. Operation Okay. Operation Every Man for Himself and best of luck to the women and kids. 23. 24. By part 24, it is already done. There is a way that maybe that was written at a time that was much more cynical, and maybe it doesn't have to be. I don't know. Maybe it just does feel better outside now than it did then. I think it does. Let's see. I've been meeting with a bunch of the students here and talking a lot about poetry and what it is, and thinking a lot about what poetry is. So this is a poem sort of about that. I'm gonna finish up with these two poems that are both called Paper. So here's the first one. Paper. Poetry is what life is. A poem is a place where, because of the lines, how they break things and emphasize that no one can stand more of the world than what can be fit into a packet of letters, you may do what your emotions would do if they were your body. Eat a live owl whole and know what the night knows, what's beneath night. Speak in images, puke beauty. Dance upon knives until you love yourself. Make yourself king of Arctic sunsets. Tell her finally. Staple your voice to her ear. Leave, go away, go further than anyone can go. Come back blind, but able to see feelings. Warn them now, as if only you know how to build an ark. Grow old and die and live to tell. It is just as they feared. Do, wake, live. Become so whole you are everyone. Except, of course, you can't do anything but pick words and write them down in order and fix them so they just say what you're thinking, just what you think will make someone else think your thought. Then you can think your thought again and again and again, like someone testing fabric between thumb and finger until it's rubbed so thin it's no longer soft. And then this is also called paper. This is like the sad portion, and it won't be followed by a happy portion, so we'll just end on a sad note, and you'll all be sad. Sorry. Life's hard, it's the truth. Paper. The dead are very dear to the living. At every table a place is set for them, the place where no one sits, which no one bothers to set, or which everyone strains to keep from setting. The dead sit everywhere, precisely between the living. For every word written, there is another word unwritten and addressed to the dead. Hence the form of a poem is precisely determined by the amount of white space required not to write what the writer wishes to, but cannot say to the dead for whom he has left a place unset. This is a metaphor. A poem is a metaphor for, a representation of, the shape a series of thoughts might take were the writer to think them instead of writing. Though please believe that I do know the proper place of poetry, its true, small importance. I call attention to it here, however, because what it represents has some importance. It is now, this moment, the only leading edge of my life, which is everything I have. And so, for every thought of something that happens or happened or might happen or will never happen, there is another simultaneous thought, a parallel equal, a thought not thought of the dead who are always present precisely because they are absent. Though, of course, the above is only a metaphor for precisely those thoughts I could think. For the others, I must search the white space where, of course, they are precisely not to be found. About what am I not writing? My dead? My mother, who died when I was only 14, whose life determines the shape of this poem? You may say that now I am writing about her, but being dead, what remains of her is precisely her absence. What does not remain, what I cannot write, what obsesses me precisely because I cannot think about it, what I want, is her life, which I cannot have. What I cannot have calls poetry into being, calls those thoughts I cannot think, to press those I can into the shape of what they are not. Art, however unimportant, is the shape want takes, because by thinking we cannot waken our dead, and so are obsessed with what to think instead. Thanks everybody for coming.